Um, okay, and the recording is starting with me laughing at Dave talking about being a recovering trombonist in the chat, which I should warn you guys, I have no chill when it comes to funny stuff in the chat. So you are going to see me actively laugh, which is part of the reason why I'm going to try now to hide the chat, because both Jill and Chris will be monitoring that on our behalf. So Dave, it seems as if maybe Anita is caught up in something. So we're going to get a lot of Dave's thoughts. And Anita will certainly jump in once available. But
and this is good because so my father, after we sold the business, my father said to me, "You need to write all this stuff down." And I started to document this stuff. But what I want to talk about whenever possible is all of the mistakes that we made and the trial and error. And it's the process itself is really educational, but it's also like you fail a lot. And I know people tell you that, but also, and I'll put my contact information in here because I really do want you to reach out with any questions, because unlike previous years during this kind of session, I didn't have a lot of bandwidth, but I'm really only working, nobody's from my company. Right? I'm really only working about 3 or 4 hours a day right now. So I really welcome your questions. So my contact info will be in the chat.
That's amazing. So, okay, so you mentioned wanting to document things you learned along the way. Maybe let's start there, because that was top of your mind. So talk to me, like, if you could keep it in a sales lane, what's maybe one thing that's sales related that you really feel like you learned along the way?
I'll start at the beginning. And the company was so much fun when it was 2 of us and we didn't have any customers. As soon as we started having customers, it got real, and it got really hard at the same time. So joking aside, obviously you need customers to live. I think that I walked into this without understanding how hard sales was. I had been around salespeople in the company, but I'd always been on the customer success side. I've always been working with the customer. The deal had already been signed, and then sales is really tough. And I learned a lot from all the various consultants and advisors we had in. So as we get into some of these like really specific things, I've got some notes here I've been making today about documenting the process and about breaking the process up. And there are many, you can read 100 different blogs on how to break up your sales process. But until we really picked apart our funnel, I wasn't able to figure out what we were doing right or wrong. And after multiple different sales leaders and consultants came in and broke apart our process, we were able to really pick it apart and say, we need to do better at getting somebody across the finish line, or educating them about this, or making them aware of our products and services and all this stuff. And however you break that down, you can look at each step and optimize it, continually optimize it. And now that we have like 6 or 8 people in the marketing team, they're focused on this part of the funnel, and every person is looking at a different thing. And then the salespeople are looking at these 5 parts of the funnel. And when you're trying to do that yourself, it's really overwhelming for sure. But you have to take time to sit down, document it, break it down. And so anyway, that's one of the things I'd be open to help you with. I mean, it doesn't just happen, and you can't just fire off emails, like I used to do, like these cold emails without, and like nobody ever responded, and I didn't do any tracking, and I didn't do any A/B testing, all this stuff. So anyway,
that's huge. So, okay. So Dee, when I think about what you shared, you're like, okay, so we had to first of all write down what is our sales funnel, which general gist, it's like how you go from somebody being a total stranger to somebody buying something from you over and over. And it's all the steps between those two things that go into your sales funnel. General gist, to make sure that we're collectively all on the same page.
Yeah.
So then I'm curious about some of the stuff that you said. You're like, okay, so then we had to document it. Like, what did that process look like? You're like, I need to document my sales funnel.
And I don't want to pitch any specific process or software or anything, but
Sure.
I jumped on the HubSpot bandwagon early on because HubSpot was really good about educating me. It was almost like an interactive marketing book. And so, but the lessons I learned were really helpful in that, they would say, what's your persona, your target persona, and you had to document it. And then when you started a new blog, you had to pick who your persona was, and it would remind you what's important to them. And it would tell you when your title was too long or short, or when the content was too long. So there are lots of great tools out there to help you focus on things. But if you're really focused on the end user, which you should be, and trying to make them be an evangelist of your software or whatever it is, your solution, if that's your goal, then you have to start with developing that person in mind. And who are they? Give them a name. And we still have these names. In fact, sales engineer Scott, one of our first personas after the acquisition, called me and said, "Do you remember me? My name's Scott." And I said, "Remember you? We built a persona around you, a persona that is held for 9 years." And so I found that to be really helpful. And so whether you studied marketing or you picked it up like I did from some software, it was really helpful to start with that end goal in mind and to start to work that funnel. You don't have to build the whole funnel at once, but you do have to start thinking about the big areas, about creating awareness, and then about educating people about your software and building trust in things before they make a decision to buy from you. And then you can, we're going to continue to tweak our funnel forever. It didn't just happen overnight, but you have to start thinking about that funnel and the different phases of that.
Excellent. Well, and you're so right. And about it being iterative forever, because sales funnel is just a process you use to speak to people that you want to pay you money. And I think it's really easy in some of this terminology to make it too micro and to forget at a macro level. It's just, what are the methodologies by which you're going to talk to customers, and to really think about it micro and macro at the same time.
And I'm looking at some of the comments here. I haven't been able to read all of them, but some of you focus on, looks like B2B and B2C. And so there's a lot about the B2C world that I believe we're seeing a lot of even B2B purchases are resembling some of those of B2C. But there are some of these things like HubSpot are really good for B2C, because they do a good job of treating individuals differently than accounts. Because like if you think of like your traditional CRM, customer relationship management software like Salesforce, it's very focused on the account, and then contacts are within the account. But there are others that are very focused on like HubSpot, that has some free versions and things that really can help with the targeting of individuals who make their own decisions, which tend to be how consumers make their decisions. And I'm not a consumer expert by any stretch. I'm not even a business expert, but we have learned from lots of trial and error. So.
Absolutely. So guys, while I'm talking with Dave about some questions we've asked him to noodle in advance, please feel free to put your own questions into the chat, because while we have a couple of things we want to make sure and hit on today, this session is for you. So please be putting into the chat questions or thoughts that you'd like for us to address before we roll out today. So while everybody's starting to noodle that, Dave, here's a question. What did COVID reveal to you about the sales process, if anything?
The first thing it revealed to us, I'll step up one level from sales, was that we had communication issues beforehand. You just being in the same room does not mean that you're talking. My wife and I definitely are not always talking, even in the same room. From a sales perspective, what that meant was our marketing efforts sometimes were not in line with our sales efforts. Who we were talking to on the internet was not always who we wanted to be talking to during demos and things. And so going remote Didn't change that, but it did highlight some of the issues we had with people not seeing eye to eye, with hearing somebody on the phone or whatever. Um, from a sales perspective, for us, we actually had some of our best quarters during COVID because a lot of businesses were accelerating their purchases for tools that help them work remotely. So we benefited from that. There were some companies that we lost on renewal because they themselves had challenges that were COVID related. Think AMC Theaters, one of our long-term customers. They kept up with their subscription, but we were very, we let people out of their contracts. We let them pay late, things like that, because they had their own problems. So there were definitely some big companies who were like, okay, we're not going to buy anything new right now. We're just going to kind of wait for this to settle down. And there were other companies who said, we need to knock this out right now because we need people to be able to do this stuff remotely. But so there's a give and take. But the biggest thing is a communication issue beforehand wasn't helped by people working remotely, for sure.
Mm. And so what did you do about it? As much as you were able to comfortably share, like what did you
Most of the team leaders, most of the, like we call them directors, most of the directors had regular stand-ups virtually. And so they were trying to communicate better within their own teams. We had more status meetings, and I know people hate to have status meetings because it sounds like I'm just telling you what I did. But some of that you, like when you're in person, maybe in the old days you saw customers come in, you kind of knew what was going on just by being around, but you miss that when you're working out of your basement. And so just having 15-minute, 30-minute, how are you doing? What's going on this week? What's your biggest challenge? Those kinds of things start to spawn some of these conversations that go on. And then maybe somebody takes a conversation offline. So I think that those kinds of regular touch points are very important, because otherwise, if you don't schedule them in a recurring fashion, you won't schedule them and you won't have them. And then you don't really know what's going on to the left and right of you. So we try to have team level open conversations, and then the team leaders, talking. But it definitely was hard for somebody in this team to keep in touch with somebody from this team because they weren't seeing each other in the break room. So we missed that. That was a culture that hurt our culture for sure. But there were some team members that would just turn on Zoom and just work. And they would work and they would talk and they would just have it on for like an hour. And they would not any specific thing to talk about, but just to have the company of each other. I thought that was really interesting. Those kinds of things just organically happen.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else that you did? Because you mentioned, did that connection of systemic ways for people to stay in touch, did that end up resolving the who we were talking to on the internet and the who we were trying to talk to in real life? Did that get them aligned in and of itself, or was there another alignment step in there somehow?
Oh, I think human communication is probably no, nothing ever got better. It just changed. I mean, I think the companies that nail human communication are successful, and I think that everything else is a challenge because there's nothing that's simple about humans. So we can make all these systems talk, but you can't make humans talk. And just by putting something on Slack and then having 8 million Slack conversations going on, that doesn't help her. So
I could not agree with you more. Anita, I saw you join us a bit ago. I wanted to say welcome. And
thank you.
Thank you very much. We started talking just a bit. We were talking with Dave a little bit about himself and his history and a little bit about what he's learned about sales through COVID times. And since you've had an opportunity to step in and join us, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, the credit union, and maybe something that relates to sales that maybe you guys have learned during COVID times?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Anita Newton, sorry for being late. I was having a battle with Zoom and Zoom was winning. So to reinstall everything, anyway, I apologize. I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Community America Credit Union, and we run an innovation lab there. And it's been really, I think the pandemic has made things harder and easier at the same time in terms of sales. What we do here in the lab is we will test products and services through Community America with a strategic filter of our goal is to help deliver peace of mind. So we look at everything from, divorce kits to online wills to a lot of stuff with young adults. And then we spin them out and sell them to credit unions around the country. And I think what's been harder about this period is that the sales cycle is longer. But when you are able to get a hold of the right person, I feel like the conversations are more meaningful and richer because you're able to really stop and really pay attention and focus. So I think that's been the good and the bad and the challenge of this time.
Interesting. So it's so interesting to hear the idea of Zoom as focused, because so often when you hear about it in the zeitgeist, it's, oh, I'm always on a Zoom, therefore I maybe not focused, this kind of thing. But you're right, when it's a one-on-one, that, I mean, somebody is staring like right at your face and it feels closer.
Well, you can't go on a mental vacation because they're looking at you, and you have to really, unless your camera's not on, but just looking at a screen, at least for me, I mean, it is more exhausting, but when people are selling to me, I tend to pay more attention because I just have this one thing. But it's harder to probably get on the schedule. But once you do, I find it's easier. I don't know.
Anita, I'm glad you mentioned this about Zoom because so I just wrote this down because I didn't want to forget this. We used to have, we had Zoom for a long time and the predecessors to it, but nobody ever had their cameras on. And I started my career before any of this, and we were always in person, whatever. And in-person selling is obviously awesome, all the body language you can read. But then if you software, especially, you need to keep costs down, and you can't always sell stuff in person. Phones, like nobody liked sitting around the conference phone and talking. All of a sudden, people turn their cameras on during COVID. And I hope that never changes because it has been awesome. I felt more connected with our customers because for the last 9 years, I rarely met any of them in person, but now I was seeing them in their homes and we would talk about what's behind them. I'd be a little nosy, like, oh, what's that? And there were some really great conversations about. I did read about Zoom fatigue. And so after a while, we did start saying, like, let's specifically have meetings where we turn our cameras off. And I now have a chair where I sit down, and during my no camera meetings, I just sit in my chair and I'm super relaxed and we're just talking about things. And there's a time and a place for each of those.
Yeah.
So that really has changed. It's changed how we sold, not necessarily better for us. Like, sometimes the sales process was longer or whatever, but connections are different now. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
So, Anita, I'd like to ask you a question, because in addition to your work at the credit union, you have a deep history with sales and sales education. I would like to ask you, hey, I'm a new technologist. I don't know a ton about sales. Where should I go to learn some basics? Like, where would Anita send me to pick up some basic information?
I don't know, I have to think about that. I would say that pretty well. I will come up with. There's one book that it's on my tip of tongue. I'll come back to you with this, but I would say that pretty much everything we learn about sales is wrong because I think it's like, oh, the big sale. It's like all about the big presentation, and if it wins or not, it's not. And I think most of you know this, but just to reinforce the point, it is pipeline management. It is the person who has the longest, who's persistent, who's willing to spend the 6 months to get the sale. And I think the thing that people make the biggest mistake is it's not about sales, it is about relationships. And more often than not, so for Community America, when people sell to me, 9 times out of 10, I may not be able to help that person for my particular project or what they want, but I can be an incredible advocate for that person. So the way they present to me, if they know who I am, if they've done the research, if they listen to me, if they don't waste my time, if they do follow up, if they're spending the time to add value in the least intrusive way possible, that to me is great. Really don't sell at to me, but really help me, drop me an article. Oh, we talked about this. What about this? Over time, even if I can't help them, more often than not, I will forward them and I will become an advocate for them. But it does take a lot of time, energy, and effort and persistence. And it's less about being the funniest, brightest person in the room. And it's the person that's really willing to do the work. That's the real deal.
Yeah. Well, and I think that mindset of I'm trying to get a sale versus I'm trying to make a friend, and like a business friendship as the goal, knowing that a certain amount of sales will just fall from that rather than I'm trying to sell. Because something about I'm trying to sell does something to some people in their noggins that's not always attractive. I think that's a really.
I remembered the book that I loved. It's called Building a Brand Story by Donald Miller. Have you guys heard about that?
Yeah.
It's really,
I heard about it from you last year, Anita.
Oh my God, it's so good. I'll put it in the chat.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, anyway. No, thank you for that. That's incredibly helpful. So, when I think about, we kind of talked about COVID, which some of what came out was innovation related, but there's always like some new like trick or tool or get more sales. And David, I want to ask this question of you. How does your company handle sales innovation, either in approach or tool or all of that? Like, how do you guys figure that out as there's always something new coming at you? How do you guys handle that?
There was a little bit of conflict between Stuart and I, my co-founder, he and I, because we didn't have a sales background, we wanted it all to be a no-touch sale. And a lot of the software we buy is. And so a lot of it is built into the product, how we engage with the product and learn about how to use it. Now, somehow you got to get to that point, right? So you have to have evangelists and you've got to have great content on your website and be found and all that kind of stuff. So we had a very hands-off sales desire, but then eventually over time, we hired a CEO who was an enterprise sales expert. And then it became very sales focused and the organization changed. And I'm not going to say it changed for the better. It just changed. It became a very sales oriented process where thought always went to how does the salesperson handle this and whatever. And I think that was kind of wrong, actually. I think going back to the being very product focused, you're very consumer focused. How does the user interact with this? So we just had this push and pull all the time, and it was causing us to ask really tough questions about, well, how does someone find this? How do they learn more information? How do we get past the contracting phase? How do we get past this phase? And we were always trying to shorten things. We kept the company very lean all the time. Our newer company is not lean. And consequently, there are people, I'm going to pick on the contracts team. We have a contracts team. They're busy. Are they busy because we have that many contracts, or are they redlining things to fill their days, right? I mean, we're humans. Like, I never redlined or read a contract. I just signed it, right? I mean, because I didn't want to deal with it. So sometimes we get in our own ways, and that's a horrible. Those are two things that are very unrealistic on the very ends. But
please read your contracts. But okay, go ahead.
Yes, you should. But we start off very lean, all of us, which means that we don't get to focus the right amount of attention on anything. And then later on, as we bloat, there are people who focus on something and they make it into a full-time job, and that sometimes that can be bad and sometimes that can be good. I think we're really going to struggle with, we brought the RFP 360 leanness into an organization that was more focused on enterprise sales with longer cycles, more complex processes. And I mean, we're 60 days into this, and there's some weirdness going on. So it's not easy.
You know, and I would just add to that. I think there are so many low cost, high impact tools to help you with pipeline management. I'm obsessed with Airtable. I don't know if you guys are on Airtable. I use Airtable. We use Infusionsoft for our CRM. And we've been able to connect Airtable and Infusionsoft so that our marketing, because I think that's the hard thing is you're small, but when you get a little bigger, your marketing efforts should hopefully help you shorten the sales cycle. So if you know your target, if you know it's media managers in Denver, building content through your CRM so that when that person actually clicks on your content, you know you're able to score that person. And after they've touched your content a couple of times, you know that when you actually reach out to them for a call, you're going to be much more likely to close it because they've been exposed to your brand. And I don't think you have to, I would not spend a lot of money when we've done these kind of systems where we're kind of connecting marketing and sales. We usually with, we used to do Excel spreadsheets. Now we use Airtable, but low cost, high impact ways so that you learn how things work. So then when you finally do spend money on like a HubSpot or, you know how to use it. So you don't buy, you don't buy a Porsche, but you don't know how to, you don't know how to drive a stick shift. Like that is a classic big company mistake. Technology isn't really it. It's more about these lightweight tapes where you learn and you make mistakes. That's really been very helpful for us.
Great point that bears repeating, because I mentioned HubSpot earlier on before you joined, Anita, and you can't look at those software tools as a crutch. And you're right. I mean, one of the things I wanted, so once you have a sales team going, they have to help their own pipeline. There's software we use called Outreach that helps. It's Cadence Management. And when somebody proposed this to me, I was like, what? Another piece of software? But one of the scary things was that I didn't want to implement that because somebody has to write all the rules. You have to write all the copy and A/B test this stuff and whatever. What's the best time of day to send all this stuff? You can't put those into place until you have the right team to operate it. And so like our HubSpot efforts have greatly improved over time because now we have 6 people focused on that. But when it was just 2 of us, it didn't get the right attention. So you're right that there's a lot of things that you can do with a spreadsheet or a piece of paper, and you can test some things and you can get things going. And when it's time, you can put a tool in place. But definitely don't just buy a tool thinking it's going to make your life easy. That's what they'll try to sell you, but that's not.
Amen. Agreed.
So let me ask this question, knowing that we remain really open to questions from you guys. Either unmute yourself and ask, or feel free to put them in the chat. But as you're noodling what you guys as an audience might want to ask either Anita or Dave, let me ask, when you're selling an innovation, right, which is largely amorphous in typically, what's one thing that you would ask everybody to try and avoid when you're selling an innovation? Anita, what do you?
Yeah, okay. This is important. Okay, so how do I say this? Salespeople make a mistake because they make me burn too many calories trying to understand what you guys do. So it has to be a smart 5th grader. And I highly recommend that when you're practicing your sales pitch, and it's hard because we love our idea, we get into our idea, practice with someone who knows nothing about anything that you do. And if you can't explain it to them, then you probably don't, you probably need to rework it. Too many people make things so hard, and it's like you use inside baseball terms that I don't understand. I don't understand what the benefits are. I don't understand what the customer problem it is. You don't understand my business. It's hard. Making the complex simple is the hardest thing. But once you nail it, you will win in the world. But so do that work. That is the most important thing. And then know my business, obviously, that's the second thing. But I think the other thing I would say is make it easy for me to say yes. I am not. So here's the thing is, even though your product is small, or like, let's say a pilot or whatever, it doesn't matter if I am testing a small thing versus a, big system. It takes the same amount of resources. And every company, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And so we're all super, super busy. And so my advice to you is make it easy for me to say yes. The next meeting or a pilot or something that's small enough where it's not hard. And then the last thing, okay, this is my last thing. I'm a big fan of, you guys have heard of the analogy. If you ask for money, you will get advice. If you ask for advice, you will get money. And so, especially as you're trying to formalize your pitch, I would schedule time with people and ask, I'm going to give you my pitch. What do you like? What do you not? What do you think? Who would enjoy it? The sort of like advice-oriented pitch is much, much more effective than trying to close a sale quickly. So those would be my top of the 11 comments. I don't know, Dave, if you have anything else to add.
I'm not an innovative person. I'm a spreadsheet operations person. I mean, this is where Anita has spent her career in innovation, and that's a really important thing. I remember 1998 when a buddy called me and said, "You gonna buy Google? Its IPO is today." And I said, "Free email? Why in the heck would I do that?" And things would have turned out a lot differently for me. And I just I don't understand innovation. I don't understand the term. I don't understand how you see it, what it means. So all I know.
But you can randomly do it. So I just want to make sure we don't downsell your skills too much.
All I know is that you see a problem, you want to fix it.
Right.
If that's innovation, then that's great. Here's the problem with creating something new is people don't wake up in the morning and Google search something like that. It's easy. It's easy to search for something you're trying to replace. But we have this problem. We sell two products, one to help people respond to RFPs to win new business to sales people, and one to people who are trying to buy new things using the RFP as a vehicle, procurement people. One side wakes up every day and says, they type into the computer, "I hate RFPs. How can I stop doing RFPs?" Boom. Now we've got search engine results. Now we've got inbound leads. But on the buying side of this, these procurement people don't just wake up every morning and say, "How can I spend money quicker? How can I, like, nobody does that." And so selling within our company, our go-to-market strategy with our two products is completely different. The personas are different. How we engage them is different. How we create awareness is different. One of them is totally proactive. One of them, we just turned on our website and 15 minutes later, we started getting inbound leads. And that funded the whole business. So I don't know how to do it. The more leading edge you are, the more bleeding edge you are. And the people who bought us saw how hard it was. We tried to sell two solutions, one for each side of the RFP. They saw how hard it was. They focused on just one side and they launched past us and then bought us. And now they're going to take their same now 200-person company globally and put all those eggs into this one basket and grow. They can grow the other side up in parallel. Super smart for them. but they learned by watching us trying to hack our way through this thing. And they said, let's follow these guys for a little bit. Let's learn from their mistakes. And they did. And they're doing it really well. Now I work for them. So jokes on me.
Hey,
Yeah.
Rebecca, we have a few questions in the chat, and Anita, go ahead, but then I want to jump on and share some of these with you, make sure we have time.
No, go for it. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the questions, and then an earlier question that had been thrown in was for entrepreneurs that are early stage, just starting up their business, how to stay focused on sales when instead of building the technology, perfecting the technology, when they aren't a salesperson. And then I'm going to dovetail with one of the questions here, which was when you're along that same line starting up, more salespeople versus less salespeople, more tech, both, how to make those straight out of the chute kind of decisions when you are early stage, getting going on sales, and not really sure how to pull the trigger to stay focused on sales.
So I'll start, and then Dave, you can I'm sure add a lot better color commentary. So I would say Dave said something that was really important. So regardless if you're a founder or you have one person or 6 person, what he said was really smart is that, having a persona in mind, it sounds really academic, but really take the time to understand who your target is. Who are they? Write it down, put a picture of that person. It is Joe, he is the procurement manager. He's 43. His fears are getting fired. He doesn't want to make a mistake. He has 3 kids. He loves baseball. Like, really understand who your target is, what their problems, their challenges in and around your product. Because they're not coming in every day thinking about your product. Really, and I think it's important that everyone in the organization knows who that is. The second thing that everyone needs to know is what is the 2-minute stump speech. And you should do this in your organization, whether it's 2 people or 6 people. I go back and ask them to write in no less than 3 sentences. What is the value proposition of your business? What's the value proposition and benefits? And see if you can do it and see if it's the same. I guarantee you it probably will not be the same. And I also guarantee that if you gave it to that 5th grader, no one would really understand it. So do that work, be consistent, and then you can refine it. But I think you get so busy and there's so many different things and challenges, whatever. If you don't come back to some really basic first principles, it will be very challenging. The other thing I would say is, as a founder, you are the product. And I think personally, when we started Mighty Good, we did all the sales ourselves. We would go out there, because we are the ones that are passionate, are excited, we understand it. And so to the degree that you can, I think you do it as long, it's hard because you have multiple jobs, but ultimately, if you don't have sales, you don't have a company. So I think you do it long as you can until you can have someone who has that same passion, conviction, understanding of your targets, and really can sell it in a way that makes sense. Otherwise, I personally think that is your job 1, 2, and 3 until you get money in the door. I don't know, Dave, what do you think?
Well, I'm not going to type this then because how do you pronounce your name? Shuri? My mom's name is Cherry, so that's what I went with first. Sorry, but you're flywheel versus funnel.
Yeah, it's French. It's Shuri. You almost had it.
I had to look up flywheel a couple of weeks ago. I think there's a little bit of. I think that people who go to Harvard take. Anita, did you go to Harvard? I'm sorry if you did. As I was going to make fun of Harvard. You did.
I did. But I went to, yeah. But
I'm going to make a joke. I was going to make a joke about the Harvard Business School books. Like people will take logical things we've been doing and they'll package it up into a book and sell it. I think the flywheel concept, last time I looked, the flywheel versus funnel is kind of this, what I like about, so even though it's a funnel visual, the way HubSpot educated me to create evangelists was the ultimate thing you are doing is creating an evangelist. Someone who loves your product so much, they're going to sell it for you for free because they tell people about it and how smart they are for buying it and how they use it. That's the goal. That's the gold standard, because that's how you don't have to sell your product anymore. It's better sold by these users. And so, I mean, and again, I'm not talking about a HubSpot. I'm just saying this is how I learned. HubSpot made me sit down with the persona sheet and put a picture of Matthew Kaiser, who's a Kansas City person who worked at Lockton at the time. Put his picture. It said, like, how much money does Matthew make? And I'm guessing, how important is cost? All these things, like really understanding your persona, that I think like an actor does for the preparation of a role, like totally understanding this person. So when you're on the phone with them or interacting with them online, like you're able to talk with them in their language. I'm going to try to get a little bit more realistic with some founders, because I didn't always get this maybe myself. But like sometimes I read about what someone's company does. And I'm like, what does that really mean? Like the buzzwords, this and that. Like I always hated the buzzwords. And I think part of that is just knowing your audience. And so as you do the research on your persona, also at the very bottom of that, like what is it going to take for them to recommend you? And that can be your end goal. Like it's not just how they purchased your software, but how they use it, how they learn about it, how they tell their friends about it. That to me is like, that's getting that flywheel going. And I don't know, we think about it in old terms. It's like a case study. I'm going to get a case study written about it. Well, that's BS. Like it's all about their word of mouth and how they talk about it.
I also think that, no, I agree with that. I would also say, just to answer that question, I think it's funnel first, flywheel second. I think you get the right, exactly what Dave's, get the right approach correct. Like get the right persona, the value proposition, the pitch. You've got something that's getting people and getting evangelists. Get that down. You've heard the term non-scalable. Be non-scalable when you're starting. Fewer, get a few, and then figure out the secret sauce. And then the flywheel is a fancy way of saying just get more people through the process. But I would start with and you will know when you're in a presentation Zoom and it's like magic. You're saying the right things. They're nodding their head. You understand it. You're explaining it in a way that makes sense. They're vibing. You know when you're killing it. And then when you can replicate, but make it really non-scalable first, so you figure that out. And then automate it. Don't do, like, it goes back to like, don't buy the technology. Don't like try to shove a ton of leads through search don't do that until you really figure out what works, then go scale.
It's a great point. I remember Lisa was our first customer. And I remember like fighting for every customer we had. And when we sold, we had to disclose all this stuff, obviously. And it was like, the customer list was, let's say, 600 companies, whatever. And I was like, what? Really? We have that many companies and all these users and whatever. And it was that focus on just learning about this one company. And it is so hard to do, because even if you go after 5 companies and get to know them and only one of them bites, like that stinks. Because I invested all this emotionally into learning about 4 other companies that don't become customers, but sometimes they circle back and whatever, and you just don't know. One of the things that I was always afraid to ask are the hard things that our sales team makes it very scientific. And they're talking to a prospective customer, and obviously they're saying the right things. They're talking about the value of the company, but they're asking very important questions back. And they're saying like, are you the decision maker? Do you have a budget? What's your time frame? I never asked those things because sometimes I didn't want to hear the answers. Because if they said, well, we don't really have a budget for this, man, I demoed any time to anybody for all the wrong reasons. And I wasted a lot of time that way. And we still have to get better at this. We still lose 4 deals out of 5. But we get better and better about disqualifying people and circling back with them later. So there's some discipline in there. But that's a great point about, and I've heard this before, and Anita, you probably mentioned it last year when we did this, and like you're right, it doesn't have to be scalable. Just make that one sale and make that next sale. Take those steps, and all of a sudden you're up the mountain. I told Rebecca at the beginning of this, before everybody joined in, it's like, I kind of alluded to this, like this was a 9-year journey for us, and all of a sudden, like essentially we're done. I'm out. I can be involved with it what I want to be. But I look back and I was like, sometimes it feels like I was taking a step and I didn't know where the next step would be, but you just keep doing it. You keep doing it. All of a sudden, like you look back and you're like, holy crap, we've come a long way. So you gotta be optimistic. Go ahead.
I'm going to ask another question along that exact line, which is again for early stage founders that are at this stage, products pretty much ready, rock and roll, go out, and they say, I've got to raise money full time, I've got to sell full time, and I've got to finish this development and our people and all of that full time. I have 3 full-time jobs, and you're telling me that I've got to get customers, but I need the money to get the customers, and it's that. So I would love for you two, with a lot of experience in that space, to give your kind of thought on that, because that is what many of the folks at this stage run up against, which is, therefore I can't sell, or to a question that was in the chat. So I'm going to delegate selling to Jane Doe. But I heard Anita tell me do it myself and not delegate, but I'm supposed to raise money, but I heard that I need to be doing it. And so those 3 things, operational development, raising money, and selling, what would be your guidance for the folks on navigating that as they're trying to bring their new business into the dollar signs revenue?
I mean, look, yeah, I mean, that is that is why it's so hard. And we're like, it's such a hard thing. I mean, I think you have to step back and say, you have so many hours in the day. Can you hear me? Did I get?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
No, we can.
Okay, good. You only have so many hours of the day. The 2 things I would suggest is look at your crew, if it's 1 or 2 people around you, and look at where they're experts. So if you have a CTO that is particularly technology rich, then lean on them. If someone is more of a CFO and really good at money raising, lean on them, and divide and conquer. And in terms of selling, maybe it's not every meeting, but it's the first meeting. I don't know if all of you guys listen to Built to Last. You guys all watch? Do you guys all subscribe to that podcast, Built to Last? I highly recommend it because it's all this. But I just read the one on Peloton. I'll listen to the one about Peloton, and the founder talked exactly about this. He was 42. He had kids. He pitched Peloton to 4,000 investors before someone said, okay, I guess, and now it's the revenue is like 1.2 billion or something like that. It's just part of the job, but that, just dividing and conquer with your team is what I would say.
And it's so hard because every situation is different. We had 3 rounds of funding and different people led each round. So when it was 2 of us, Stu spent half of his time pitching and half of his time developing software. Well, that slowed down our product. Second round, I did the pitching, but we had a dedicated sales team of 3 people by that time. So I think it's really hard to let someone come in and to delegate to somebody, because they got to have the same carrots that you have. And that means maybe giving up some ownership. That means giving up some cash that you may or may not have. Like, all that stuff is tough. And I think a lot of these things aren't good for blog topics because they're so personal that you really have to discuss them with people you trust. And that goes back to having good advisors and mentors that are people who give you their time because they're good people and know what they're talking about. And also consultants. We hired Doug Burris on this call for consulting on HR and recruitment stuff. got us into a bunch of lawsuits. I'm just kidding. No, but you have to. There are no easy decisions, and you'll second guess everything you do, and you'll make mistakes. Everything we've done, we did it 4 times the bad way, and then it worked out the 5th way, including our 3 pitches to Digital Sandbox. Bad, good. That stuff happens.
That's fantastic. Well, guys, we're coming to the conclusion of our time. We have just a few remaining moments in our time together today. And so I wanted to ask Anita, knowing that we have some wonderful early stage technologists on the phone with us, what is a parting thought that you would like to leave with the group? And then I'm going to come to you, Dave, with the same question.
I would just say that, it's a hard slog, and figure out your process to work through the negative voice in your head that tells you you're going to fail, and to have a good process for when that happens, because I think that's the hardest thing, because most of the time, like with Mighty Good, we were told no by Walmart 4 times before we got the 5th one. And if we wouldn't have stopped, we would have not have seen the success. The other thing I would say, just to answer the question from Chris, in terms of just management in your time, I think this, I've tried every single system, but I have a notebook, and on my left side on Sunday, I'm like, here are the 3 things that will have the greatest step function improvement to my business. And then I have my other 92 lists. And I think it's just really keeping to go back to those first principles of what are the few things I can do that has the greatest impact. And if you think about that and you keep working on that, it could be a people issue or system. And then I send that to my team and say, this week, these are the 3 things I care about more than anything else. And all the other stuff, are little fires that you just have to let them live. But that has been a really helpful tool for me. So that's what I would say.
Excellent.
I'm horrible at time management. I do whatever is easiest. To be honest, I do what's easiest for me and most fun. And that's not the right way to do it. And so I don't know how to get past this. I mean, marry the right person, marry rich. That's my, no, I'm just kidding.
Marry well is good. Someone who cares about you.
So you have to work at it. You got to be honest with yourself. And I try to be honest with myself about, understanding my shortcomings and whatever and then broad picture, finding a support group of like-minded entrepreneurs who understand what it is, because your friends who work for big companies, they have their own problems, but they're not your problems. They don't understand what that pressure is like. You need to have friends of all different kinds, but definitely having this group that's going to hold each other accountable. And I've been part of some of these different groups where we even had to pay to join them. There was a moderator and all this stuff. And some of those are good, where you sit around and you hold each other accountable and you say, what are you going to do this time next month? And then you commit to it. And you have this, it's kind of like a workout group or something like that you don't be alone, because this is a very lonely endeavor to start your own business. So make sure you're not alone.
Absolutely. So let's give all of you guys a huge round of applause. Thank you very much to Anita and Dave for joining us today. And to go off of what Dave said about get yourself connected with some entrepreneurial community, please, 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 take a look at what's going on at the UMKC Innovation Center's Technology Venture Studio, UMKC Innovates. Feel free to reach out to us at info@digitalsandboxkc. Email us. We will happily glue you to some human cell, not just in conversation, but through other things as well. And so thanks again to you both. And I'll let everybody get on to going to sell something, because nobody eats until somebody sells something.
And I put my link in. Feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you both, Dave and Anita.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.